Okay, so it's 9:30. I'm sure people will continue to log in, which is fine. I want to say thank you guys for showing up on this extremely cold day, and spending a little bit of time with us. If we have not met yet, my name is Joy Carr. I'm the Director of University Advising, and we are here today with some of our colleagues from Student Financial Services and the Registrar's Office to talk a little bit about some of those processes that we use most often or that students will ask us about. No pressure, but Kate Kim is one of my favorite presenters in the entire campus. And so I always like the opportunity to have Kate share things with us. I'm grateful to Kate and to Misty for talking to us about changes and some updates, just sort of a behind the scenes look. We do have a lot of newer advisors over the past couple of semesters who may not be as familiar with these processes, but also it's just nice to get sort of a behind the scenes look at what's going on and be able to ask questions and get just a more developed understanding of the things that we do. Um, so Kate will go first. Toward the end, Misty Woldemachile from the Registrar's Office will talk a little bit about the differences between the DegreeWorks Responsive and DegreeWorks Classic, which, as you may have seen from emails, is going away at the end of this academic year. So as usual, we will have plenty of time for people to ask questions. So Kate, I will turn it over to you.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, no pressure, but I have to keep my spot as one of your favorite trainers here. I do want to let you guys know I'm being joined by a couple people from our office as well. So we have David Shoemaker, Angela Jones, and Mary Frentress. They're on the call with us today. And oh, and looks like Aaron Stats here too. They are all here so that I don't tell you wrong information. So they also might hop in and explain something a little bit more. They are from our student aid operations, which is our processing team. So once we get into some of the aid specific information, we might hear from them as well. But we're also just here to answer your questions. Um, I am not a very formal person by any means. If you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to just unmute and go ahead and ask questions. I'll try to stay up with the chat, but I'm going to warn you that my screens and everything with sharing, it's not always easiest to see that. So actually maybe Mary, can I put you in charge of that? Can you just double check on the chat, and if there's anything, interrupt me. Okay, thanks. um, so we're just gonna go through this. Interrupt anytime if you have any questions, please feel free to do that. So we're going to start with just some very basic financial aid information. When Joy and I first started talking about this, it seems like years ago, but I'm sure it was just a couple of months. Um, One of the things that we talked about was let's talk about some basic financial aid things so that we're all on the same page. This is not meant so that you can give financial aid advice. Please reserve that for the WVU Hub. But we also know that you get questions. And so if you can direct students in the right way, tell them what they, where they need to go, who they need to ask, that's going to make, hopefully, your job easier and get them questions faster. So again, this is very basic. Some of you might know this well. Some of you, this might be the first time that you're seeing this. But basically, we've got two main types of aid and just main categories. Okay, so think of this just as categories. And this is going to all tie in later when we talk about our appeals and stuff as well. But basically, we've got need-based aid and non-need-based aid. And those two types is dependent upon what type of aid a student may be eligible for. So a need-based aid is going to depend on factors from the FAFSA. It's going to depend on the SAI of the student. And examples, like some of the big ones of those are our Pell Grant and our West Virginia Higher Education Grant, Federal Work Study. There are more. Those are not the only three that are need-based. But need-based is a calculation. It works with the SAI from the FAFSA, and it determines how much of that type of aid a student is allowed to have. Okay, so the reason I'm telling you this is when a student comes to you, maybe their second year, and says, "Why don't I have a Pell Grant anymore?" Maybe a light bulb can go off in your head and be like, "That's need-based aid." Maybe, did something change? Did, a parent get a different job, and you're making a lot more now and maybe not eligible for that Pell Grant? Again, not a conversation that you need to have with them. You can just say, "That's a question for the hub." But knowing, understanding some of these types of aid again can direct you in your conversations with students. Non-need based aid just means it doesn't depend on those same factors. It doesn't depend on the SAI from the FAFSA. Some non-need based aid can also be merit based, so like scholarships. Some is not, like loans. So there's a lot of different things in that non-need based bucket. Um, but those things are separate from the need-based. The other thing I wanted to say with need-based aid is most of it, I can't think of any that would not require. It's going to require a student do a FAFSA. So again, that's another very easy thing. If a student comes to you and says, why am I not seeing my Pell Grant, for example, did you complete your FAFSA this year? There's students out there that believe they only have to do it once before they start college and then they're good forever, and that's not true. So, that's a simple reminder as well. I have a lot of links in this presentation. I am going to share this with Joy later, so you'll have all of those. But I wanted to make a note of those. I've tried to link everything that I talk about today back to our websites, so that those are things that you can share with students if that's appropriate, or if that would be helpful to you. Okay, the other big thing is eligibility requirements. And there are a ton of eligibility requirements, and basically they're different based on what type of aid you're looking at and talking about. Okay. Um, so this is not, a blanket statement. All aid requires this, because that's just simply not true. They're all different. But some of the big things, so if a student is, wondering where their aid is, wondering why they don't have something, some of the things that you might be able to guide them toward or ask them about is, have you completed your FAFSA? Again, that's a big one. Are you enrolled at the level that you need to be? Some aid requires half-time enrollment. Some requires full-time enrollment. We're going to talk all about degree pursuant and what that means and how that factors into aid in another session. But that is important too. Are your hours, you might be full-time, but if none of them are degree pursuant, you might not be eligible for anything. So, and then also specific programs. And I'm looking that link, I messed that up, so I will fix that. But a specific program, meaning like, if a student starts out in one college and they get a departmental scholarship from that college, and then the second year they change their major, they're not going to be eligible, most likely, for that award from the first college. So that, of course, is something, to remind them of. If you're no longer in that program, you're not going to get the specific aid for that program. I do really like, again, I will fix this link, but I really do like this enrollment standards page that we have on our website. It goes through a lot. I don't want to say all, because all of our lists are never all, but most of the most common types of aid that students get here at WVU, it goes through all those different types. It tells you, what the enrollment standard is. Does it have to be degree pursuant or not? That's one we'll definitely look at in our training later this spring about degree pursuant coursework, because that one's really good. And I think it definitely helps students understand, all of the different things that they need to think about with aid. All right. I'm sure that you've heard, because we've heard, you never told me. I didn't know that I wasn't on track to renew. I didn't know that I needed to do whatever. So I'm sure you've heard that too from students. I will tell you that we have told them. I promise we do send emails. Um, the hub communicates with students at multiple times during like a yearly cycle. So we're communicating all the way from when aid is first on the account and first offered, telling them what to do, how to accept their aid, all the way through when it disperses. We tell them about what the renewal requirements are and if they're meeting those or not. Actually, those renewal emails are probably going to start going out here very soon. We always warn them as far ahead of time as we can about if they're on track to renew or not, because we want to give them time. If they need to pick up a mid-semester class or plan to take a summer class, um, we want them to know that before August. So those, if the student has unsatisfied requirements, and that could be something in regard to their FAFSA or something in regard to like an appeal that they have submitted. That could be any number of requirements. But there are things sometimes that students have to do before they're eligible for their aid. And so, we're constantly communicating, hey, we're still waiting on this thing. We're specific about what it is, and we tell them about how to send it to us. If they need more coursework or anything, if they are half-time and we're like, are you supposed to be half-time or do you need to be full-time? Because that's going to change your aid. I see a hand from Lisa.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I did that because I didn't want to interrupt your train of thought.
Go for it. It's okay.
But I did have a quick question.
Mhm.
Guess I know I hate talking to blank screens for my students. I'm like wrapped up in my office. It's so cold. So I'm an advisor over here in FIS. And so just a quick question, mostly just for clarification. So I know that I am presenting my students with the correct information because I believe at the start of January, at least the start of the semester, some of those notices did go out and I frequently get the panicked responses from the students going, am I losing my aid and all that? And I explained that it's just letting everyone know. So are those going to be generated generally for everybody, just saying, hey, this is just so you're aware? Or do they, is it based upon, oh, we noticed that you're not meeting that GPA requirement, or you're not at this moment based upon your enrollment with this semester at the correct credit hour limit? And because I basically have told them, it's just letting you know here, we can check and all this. But in terms of how specific those letters are, I was kind of curious just because I get the panic responses a lot and they freak out so much. And I explain
Sure.
that it's just letting everyone know. But I guess kind of the timeline of when those get checked and
Mhm.
then just confirming that, do they have to do anything, say they're taking something over the summer to bump up their GPA or to get those extra credit hours? Do they have to let the hub know or anybody that they've, yes, I've completed these requirements, or is that something that's automatically checked?
Okay, no, great questions. David, correct me if I'm wrong, if you know on this. I believe that we do pull reports, so that those communications are going to students that we notice you're not on track for some reason. There could be multiple reasons. It could be a GPA, it could be a credit hour, it could be a you're not enrolled in as many credit hours that it looks like you should be. Um, but I do believe that those are specific. That's not a blanket, hey, just check out your aid kind of thing.
That is correct, Kate.
Okay. So if your student is getting that notification, there is a reason. However, um, we do start those early, and therefore, if a student gets it early January, they might have been on that report for, like not having the correct credit hours. And then during add drop, maybe they are adding another class and now they're good. Like those can resolve pretty quickly, depending upon what the situation is. Um, So it kind of it depends. There's a lot of it depends with that question. But yes, they got it for a purpose. And if they want to talk with somebody about their specific situation and have somebody, go through and check, they can call the hub, to talk about that. They can look at everything. Um, as far as will they need to contact us to resolve it? If they take a summer or if their GPA gets better after spring or whatever. No, we will automatically look at accounts and make sure that everything is updated accordingly based on, after spring grades and then after summer grades. Excuse me. Summer gets anxious, I guess, for students. Students get anxious in the summer because a lot of times we will wait until the end of summer two. If they have both summer one and summer two coursework, we'll wait until they're done until we update those. And so sometimes a student is like, but I'm good now, but we haven't looked at them yet because they have later classes or something like that. But it is an automatic thing. And again, if they ever want to double check, call us. That's perfectly fine. We're happy to do that. But they don't have to if they know that they're going to meet that and they're just waiting on it to all update.
Okay, perfect. And then just a really quick follow-up based off of what you just said. If students are taking a course in transient, so it might take an extra moment for it to come back in. And I try and make sure my students aren't taking a course at the second half of the summer somewhere else that's going to be butting up right against when we start, but sometimes they don't listen. So if we're in that situation where it's, everything's coming in right at the start of the term, is there a cutoff for when all that information needs to be in to you all to confirm that they have met the aid requirements?
So it gets murky in that. No, there's not. I mean, we're going to look at that whenever it comes in. Get it in as soon as possible. Okay, but we're gonna look at it. I don't believe that we have like a hard cutoff date. If anybody on my team knows differently, let me know. But I think it's just kind of like, get that in as soon as possible and we'll review. However, when we're talking about getting that aid on accounts for billing purposes, that's where it could be a problem for a student, okay? Because we would, especially for a transient class, and this even happens to students who are in our like summer, our later summer courses, because bills are due August 1st. And a lot of times those courses go, into the end of the first week of August. And so we don't have final grades by that billing date. So students might not have their aid at the bill due date. So they need to either cover it in a different way. Some students like will make a payment plan or something because they only have to, pay a portion before their aid is back. I've seen some of them like, pull from a 529 or something, cover it in full and then get a refund whenever their aid comes back. Whatever they want to do. Some of them just say, I can't take the late fee, and then kind of deal with that later. It doesn't really matter to us how they do it. We just want them to be aware that if if that's coming in later, whether it be transient or whether it be because of a later summer class, if their aid's not going to be on their account by the bill due date, that there's consequences. There could be consequences for that. So they either have to cover it in another way or do something else.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that.
Hey, we also have a question in chat from Stephanie, and she says, I have students who will retake courses and as a result need a summer class to hit their 30 hours. They will often be dropped from aid at the end of spring and then ask for it back at the end of summer / have it added back. Is there a way to have students contact the hub before then so their aid would not be removed at the end of spring?
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my mind around all of that whole situation. Yes, Yes, they could contact the hub and say that they would, say that they're taking summer. I do believe though, especially if this is for scholarships, and being that you said 30 hours, I think that we're talking about a scholarship here. It's still going to show like not renewed or canceled. Um, so it's not really going to change anything. I mean that scholarship is still going to be on pause until they get to those 30 credit hours. Um, but they can certainly let us know um, if that makes them, feel better about talking to somebody. They don't have to though. It's not going to change the way that the aid looks during the summer, if that makes sense. Yes. Yeah, it has to be like they have to earn it. They have to meet the renewal. Yeah. Good questions. Anything else right now? Okay. Okay. So I tried to put together a little bit of a, what can an advisor do? How can you help students? And these are very simple. But one is familiarize yourself with the websites, and you might already be incredibly familiar. Hopefully the links that I'm going to provide today will help with some of those specific things. But if you can, if a student has specific questions and you can say, oh, well, you can read about this here, or oh, you need to do an appeal, here's where you start it. I mean, any anything to guide these students is going to help. Um, but I would also say that, anything that you can guide them with or point them to, that's going to build their trust in you. They're going to know that you are somebody who is knowledgeable and somebody that they can go to whenever they do have those questions. So understanding like how that network of websites works, what's on there, what are the big sites that are good for students, that's a really good, a best practice to have those at the ready. Encourage students to check their email and to read their emails. And I know that this is the struggle, right? Because we all hear, well, I didn't know about that. Well, we emailed you 30 times. Did you read any of those? And I'm also a hypocrite because I'm on, like company emails or whatever. And yeah, I've probably got 15 from the same sender in my inbox and I haven't read it. So I understand that that's a struggle, but that is something from day one, tell students like, hey, maybe if you are communicating with your students via email too, say, listen, you need to look out for emails from me. You need to look out for emails from the hub. These are really important things that can impact your future, like literally your financial future. So this is an important thing. So definitely encourage that as much as you can. Encourage students to talk to the hub if they have specific questions. Some students are afraid to go to the hub. They are afraid that their questions are dumb, or they're afraid that somebody is going to judge them based on the questions they have, the aid that they have or don't have, or whatever. I worked in the hub for probably 3 or 4 years. I've met with those students, and I want to tell you, first of all, we're super friendly. You can say, like, the hub's good people, okay? They're there to help you. But also, like, I do understand from a student's perspective, if they don't understand exactly what they're supposed to ask or what's going on. I've met with students before who came in 3 or 4 times because they didn't know the question that they needed to ask. They didn't understand they don't understand what they don't understand, right? So any guidance that you can give, you can say, hey, you need to go to the hub and you need to ask about your scholarship renewal, or you need to go to the hub and you need to ask about your FAFSA, whatever. Okay. Any guidance you can give, but encourage them to go, and encourage them to go before there's major issues. A lot of times we have students walk in who are already in a situation that could have been prevented had they come a couple months ago. So anything that you can do, um, to try, and I'm sure that this is true in your work with students too. If you had only talked to me, you know, last semester, we could have fixed this, or we could have been in a better position now. But that's what I would encourage, encourage your students to go to the hub. It's not a bad place. It's normal. It's a thing. Go get help. All right. We are going to move into satisfactory academic progress appeals, which is very specific after we have had a lot of very not specific information. Are there any questions before we move into this? Okay. All righty. So satisfactory academic progress, and we're talking about this because you as an advisor will have a role in this. Hopefully you are you understand SAP pretty well, but we wanted to give some context and then talk about maybe best practices, or we definitely want to talk about the academic success plans that you all will create for a student. So SAP is the measure by which we determine if a student is on track or not. At the most basic level, that's what it is. So there's the qualitative measure. Students have to have a 2.0 GPA to be considered on satisfactory academic progress. That may be different based on program, especially for graduate students, which I don't know if you guys work with undergrads or grads or both, but some graduate programs will have different SAP standards. So we do have those. I think we have a lot of them anyway, posted on our website. But if you ever have a question about that, we can definitely research and make sure that you know exactly what the standards are for your student. Blanket statement though, most of them are the 2.0 GPA. There's also the quantitative measure, which is a student has to complete 67% of their attempted coursework, and they have to be able to complete their degree within 150% of the published time. So those are the measures at which that we look at to determine if a student is meeting satisfactory academic progress or not.
Hey, Kate, we had another little question. Isn't from Jen saying, isn't summer in progress at WVU quote on the books?
I don't know what you mean by on the books.
Kate, I think this is going back to the scholarship renewal scenario we talked about a couple of minutes ago, but essentially until that grade is earned and it shows in our system, we wouldn't be updating that scholarship or renewing that scholarship until it is actually earned.
Gotcha.
Well, okay, I have a question here. I'm challenging you, and I mean that the best possible way. The only reason I'm asking the question is that we give them aid for the spring semester and they haven't met 30 hours of renewal, and that we're counting that in progress work. So why is the student losing aid in the summer when we legitimately use the calendar of fall, spring, summer? I guess I don't want us to be penalizing students in the summer who may actually be some of our most at-risk students, who being burdened by additional costs. Now, I'm not arguing that we need to be throwing money at unsuccessful. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it doesn't seem fair to me or equitable that we're awarding aid for the spring semester and they have not met that 30-hour renewal. They haven't, they may not have met the GPA renewal or whatever it is, but we give them the clock of fall, spring, summer. So I guess that's where my confusion is at. Why aren't we being consistent with that for summer as well? And I totally get, I don't want us to be paying for a student that doesn't get it. But it just seems inequitable when you compare it to all the other 3 semesters, if that makes sense.
I get it. Let's clarify something and then we'll see if we're on the same page or not. So when a student has a scholarship, first of all, the majority, I won't say all because there's always something, but the majority of our scholarships are not usable in the summer. There are some situations, but they are fewer. Okay. So the majority of our scholarships are fall spring scholarships.
Okay, that helps.
So that's a big thing. Also, for student scholarships, when they renew, they are renewing for the upcoming year. So if a student takes their 30 credit hours in the fall and spring, they then have renewed their scholarship for the following fall spring. So a student is not working towards their 30 hours for their current year scholarship. They're getting those 30 hours for the upcoming year.
Gotcha.
Does that make a little bit more sense then in
It makes more sense that some of their scholarships and some of their types of aid would not be available for summer
Mhm.
because those types of aid are just not set up that way.
Right.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, of course. No, that's an important question because we get that question from students as well. And they're like, well, you know, why isn't it in the summer is sometimes a question. But also they don't understand that they're not working for that current, like whatever scholarship that is currently paying out on their account, they have either earned that if they're a freshman, they earned it when they came in and met the requirements to get it. Or they earned it their previous year with the GPA and the 30 hours. So it's not like they have to have that current. So we are looking at the end of spring, we're looking at their scholarship and their renewal requirements for the following year. Do they get it now starting in the fall? Have they met those requirements? And that's often why, if they haven't, then they're seeing it canceled in the summer, because generally that would be when they are showing it, waiting for them for the fall. It's not something that's paying for the summer, but it's something that's showing like, okay, it's ready to go. If it's canceled, then that means, did not renew. That means that they still need to do a couple of things in the summer in order to get it for the fall.
But the summer is still considered to be a part of that financial aid because it goes fall, spring, summer. And so there is a bit of technically students are told that they still have until the end of summer. And so it can be a little bit confusing for a student where that's a part of it. But if the aid only runs in fall and spring, not that they're using it for the summer, but using the summer to keep it up for the next school year, it can be a little bit confusing for students and for advisors. I can share, but it does make some sense with what you're saying. So thank you for that clarification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you use the phrase financial aid, including all types of funds, not just FAFSA, yes. Anything that pays to a student's account, we consider financial aid. Now, obviously, that can be broken up into a lot of different categories and a lot of different types. But when we're saying, we're working with financial aid, it's stuff from FAFSA, it's private loans, it's scholarships, all of those are considered financial aid. Yeah. FYI, excluding professional programs, all graduate programs require 2.75. Okay, awesome. Thank you. I think I'm caught up on chat. If I missed anything, feel free to interrupt. But let's move on to SAP. Okay, we went through all of these. Any questions on the measures by which satisfactory academic progress is determined? Are we okay on all those? Okay. All right, so whenever a
Hold on,
student
Kate, we have
Oh,
a
sorry.
question. For 150%, is this years or credits? 150%.
credits. So whatever the program is, however what the length of the program based on credits, it's 150% of that credit count. Okay, so when a student is not meeting any one of those markers, so it doesn't have to be all three, it just whatever one they are not meeting. So a student could be not making satisfactory academic progress and they are totally fine. They might have a wonderful GPA, but they might have dropped a lot of classes and therefore their completion rate is not where it needs to be. So it only takes one of those standards to have them not meeting the satisfactory academic progress. The GPA and completion rate measures are reviewed at the end of the spring semester. For the maximum attempted hours, that's evaluated each semester for enrolled students. And so if we see that a student is not making satisfactory academic progress, they're notified. Any aid that might be already offered on their account for a future semester is canceled. And they are eligible to appeal. And we'll talk about the appeal process and everything in depth, but their appeal is going to be at wvu.studentforums.com. All the appeals and all required documentation is going to be able to be uploaded to that site. So the appeal process, this is probably what is going to be the majority of our time here, is talking about appeals and what's an appealable situation. How do we counsel a student who's in this situation? So of course the student's going to go on their student forms site and they're going to be able to complete, there's a little appeal form that they have to fill out. They have to state why they didn't meet the standards. And students have to have some kind of extenuating circumstance in order to appeal. So for example, a student might have gotten sick and been in the hospital for maybe several weeks during the semester. Obviously, that's going to put them behind, and they might have therefore either had to withdraw or they did very poorly that semester. That would be a situation in which a student would want to appeal because that was a circumstance beyond their control, where they weren't able to keep up with their classwork. Okay. They have to provide documentation. So after they complete their part of appeal where they talk about their situation, they need to tell us, I got super sick. I was in the hospital for X amount of days during the semester, whatever. Third-party documentation could be a doctor's note, some kind of documentation from the hospital. This website that's linked here shows a lot of different, a lot of the standards of what the documentation needs to be. So like if it's a note from a doctor, it needs to be on letterhead. It needs to be signed. There's specific standards with what documentation we can and cannot accept. And then the third part of the appeal is the academic success plan, which is the part that the advisor completes with the student, and then the student can upload to their site. All right, so this goes a little bit more in depth on what kind of circumstances we generally see as acceptable for appeals. So medical issue, family medical issue. So it might not have been the student, but if mom or dad got a cancer diagnosis and the student had to go home for a certain amount of time to take care of somebody, something like that. Death of a family member or very close friend, adoption or birth of a child of the student. legal issues, again, something that the student could not have anticipated and that caused them to be pulled away from their studies. Okay. Any questions on any of these or any things that you guys have run into with AS or satisfactory academic progress appeals in the past? It's kind of like these are the basics, but I also, if you have specific questions about it, I want to make sure you're hitting that. Go ahead, Joy.
So I want to know if you have a future slide about students who have circumstances that are not what I would call the obvious circumstances. So often we have students who come in and they're not using their accommodations that they maybe had in high school, or they don't recognize the difficulty between high school and college. And so they have a really rough semester or two, and they're kind of turning it around, or maybe they're working too much. I guess my point is, I think it's obvious for us to see when there has been a significant one-off event that has impacted a student's performance, and that is, of course, much easier to document.
Sure.
What happens when a student's coming to college and for the first time has access to therapy or other sorts of things that are a little more long-term and systemic? Can you talk a little bit about those? Because I really feel like we see a lot of those and they feel very gray area.
I can, but Angela or David, I feel like you'd be better at this. Do one of you want to take that?
I'll try my best, and Angela,
Okay, great.
feel free to jump in as well. So to your specific question, Joy, so students, when they come in, we don't measure SAP. I think that was on the very first slide. We don't measure SAP until the end of spring. So that first time freshmen coming in, they do have that full year, so let's say the fall semester, they just got off to a rocky start. Maybe they're at like that 1.8. So they're getting the resources they need, and the warning message is that, hey, you need to make some improvements. We would not make that student SAP or make them bad, so to speak, for financial aid purposes until after the spring grades come in. But to build upon the scenario that you talked about, you mentioned that student, the hypothetical, they might have had some issues. You mentioned therapy. So it sounds like potentially that student may have had some issues that would be acceptable to appeal after the spring grades post if they were bad. So if let's say they didn't know how to utilize the therapy, they were maybe had some sessions, medical, extenuating circumstances before, they could use that as part of their appeal. And they would just need to explain that. I know it's not always black and white, but they do need to kind of explain that. And we will work with them as long as they can document it. Just like you said, maybe missing some therapy, or even in the past before coming to college, if they can document they did have some issues in the past, and that did have a correlation to them not being able to succeed academically, then we would definitely take that into consideration. And as long as we can document it, we would likely approve that student. But I think it's important to note, we only measure at the end of spring, with the exception of maximum time frame. I don't know if that answered your question, but
It does. Thank you.
For these appeals, there is a lot of gray area. And so I think for, an advisor, your best bet is going to be talk to that student about what kind of documentation that they need to get, what kind of, how to best explain their situation, because they do have to put like a personal statement. The worst that we can say is no. But we also don't want to tell a student like not to appeal if it is a situation where it's that like gray area, the other thing that I wanted to say that is loosely connected to this. Let me go back to here. It must be on a future slide. If we get an appeal and a student is like, maybe they say something, but they don't have the documentation to support it, or they have documentation, but they didn't mention like You know, I've seen appeals before that come in and the student has like doctor's notes and stuff, but they didn't mention a medical issue. They might have, sometimes students just, you know, put in like, I did bad this semester. And then they have all this medical documentation. We will reach out to them and we will say, hey, can you explain this a little bit better? Or you mentioned this specific thing, but don't have any documentation for it. Do you have something that you could give us to prove this situation or to help us better understand your situation? So we do try to work with students to get to the bottom of what's going on so that we can then, you know, our teams who make decisions on those have the best information available to determine what to do for that student. Okay.
We have another question.
Okay.
Okay, from Kathy. What about students who have had mental health issues but have not sought therapy? Can advisors be third-party documentation based on ongoing conversations with the student?
I want to say no.
That is correct. So unfortunately, just the third-party documentation from an academic advisor would not constitute something we would deem acceptable. But keep in mind, if they have genuine, you know, mental health issues, that's something that didn't just happen one day. So, you know, perhaps they do start to seek therapy, and then we can get some actual medical documentation that would explain the circumstances that they are going for and the ongoing treatment that they are seeking moving forward. Because we recognize that didn't just happen in one day. So the totality of that entire circumstances, depending upon what type of treatment and what they're trying to better themselves, could be looked at.
All right, we're going to move into the ASP or the academic success plan and some of you know, the advisor's part in this, but if anything else comes up, please feel free to continue asking questions. So when a student needs to do an SAP appeal, one part of that appeal that they have to submit is their academic success plan, and that is where the advisor comes in. So they should be meeting with you in order to complete this. They're completed in DegreeWorks, and of course, we're going to look at that here in a little bit with Misty. But basically, what this is think of it like a roadmap. Okay, a roadmap for the student to come back into compliance. Most of them are 3 semesters. The max I want to say that we will allow those to be is 3 semesters. And we review them each semester to make sure that that student is staying on track. Oh, I guess it's not on here. One important thing is that those ASPs must be locked. We see a lot of times that an ASP will come in and it's not locked. The reason that we want it locked is I believe only advisors can lock them. But students can create a plan, or used to be. I don't know the new DegreeWorks so well, but I know in the old DegreeWorks, a student could create their own plan. So we didn't want, you know, want them to do that and then be submitting a plan that they created, not you. So an academic success plan includes the degree pursuant courses for each semester. Now I'm going to let probably David or Angela talk about this a little bit more because there are some changes coming. Currently, like right this moment, what we need to include on that is the coursework that they would be taking. So, you know, what specific courses they're going to be taking. We are moving in the future to not having to have a detailed list of courses, but instead stating how many degree pursuant courses they would have. David, do you want to clarify that at all, or Angela? I don't know who.
Sure. I'll just, so yeah, we didn't have a whole lot here. So we are working, I know Misty, I think Misty's on the call. We are working with Misty and OUR. There will be some changes forthcoming and to the better of how this is going to operate. The intention is that hopefully we'll get this set up for students that are appealing for summer 25 or fall of 25, which we could anticipate those appeals probably starting sometime in the spring semester. But essentially, we want to relax some of the requirements that we've had implemented in the past, where advisors would itemize every single course that the student needs to take. And it's not to say that you still can't do that. It's just that we're no longer going to require it. There will be a few exceptions that we will require. So if a student is DF repeating a course, we would need to have that annotation. But if you just have a student, and it's just going to be a pretty standard plan, no DF repeats, essentially all that we're really going to be looking for would be the GPA that's required and the number of degree pursuant hours that the student will be taking. So our hope is that's going to kind of reduce the administrative burden on the advisors, yourself, and also for the student as well. We know that there's oftentimes a little bit of back and forth if the ASP isn't exactly to our current specifications. So our hopes, this is going to kind of streamline the process and just make it a better experience overall. Once again, we're still working out some functionality, so more to come here soon, and we definitely will be communicating through the different listservs and passing on that information when that time comes. But since we were meeting today, we did want to advise there's going to be some good changes coming in the very near future, hopefully for the summer semester when students will start appealing in the spring. Angela, did you want to come off mute? Is there anything I missed there on some of the requirements that we will be relaxing?
No, it was just the DF repeat and making sure that if it's a student that has GPA issues, that they're indicating each semester what they're going to require for GPA so that the student comes into compliance within 3 semesters. But, you know, it is exciting because I do feel like it's going to open up a lot of opportunity for the students and the advisors to be able to change up their coursework as needed based on what classes are available. So if one class is full, then they can look at switching it over without having to update the ASP.
Go ahead, Frederick.
So I'll just echo what Joy had mentioned. It is exciting news. That's really amazing. I know you mentioned that this is still being developed and trying to work through some things. Is this possibly thinking through, like, even the possibility of not having that degree plan in DegreeWorks and just a note in the notes section?
Unfortunately, no, sir. It will still have to be the ASP. We're definitely no longer going to be requiring the specifics with each individual course itemized, but it would still have to be an academic success plan. That is one of the regulations on having that on file. It's just we're going to be reducing the requirements of how detailed it has to be. Once again, if an advisor wants to have that detailed plan, perfectly okay. It's just that it's no longer going to be required under all circumstances.
Perfect. Thank
Great
you so much.
question.
And like David said, as soon as that is finalized, I think we're just looking at functionality in DegreeWorks right now, but as soon as we get everything ironed out and ready to go, we will be communicating with you all for that. We're hoping for starting summer 25, that's what I put in here. But of course, that could be pushed to fall, we'll see. All right. Let's wrap up with the rest of the stuff for SAP appeals. There are priority dates and final deadlines for each semester, and I'm just going to link the website for that because those are different for every semester. So we do have those posted, but please refer to those because those are going to be, updated accordingly each semester. And priority is really for like pre-bills due kind of thing, making sure that things are not bills due, pre-add and drop and everything. And then, final deadline is like the final chance to get everything done. Obviously, we're encouraging students to get everything by priority and have that all lined up and ready to go. Our team's goals are always to review and respond within 5 to 7 business days. That could be quicker depending, especially with those priorities. The earlier that a student gets everything in, we will work our best to get those reviewed and respond to a student with decisions as quickly as possible. And like I said, I did mention this earlier, if we're seeing reviews come in or appeals come in that are seem incomplete, seem like, maybe this seems like a good situation, but they're missing this part or whatever. We are going to communicate with that student via their mixed email to hopefully get everything that they need, whether that's clarification, documentation, what have you, for that appeal so that we can move them forward with that. So that is very important. If you have a student who has submitted an appeal, communicate to them, make sure that you're checking your email, make sure that you're checking your student form site, because any updates, anything that we need, will come through there. Okay, outcomes. So after that, about 5 to 7 business days, the student will receive their outcome. Of course, we hope that that isn't approved and they're moving forward and they're, have their aid still. But there are times when their appeals are denied. So they might be denied because looking at all the information, they're not going to be able to come back into compliance within the 3 semesters that are required. There might not have been an acceptable appealable situation. Humans make mistakes. We don't always do the things that we're supposed to do, and that is certainly true of our students. Sometimes they just didn't do what they needed to. Or maybe documentation was not able to be provided, or they didn't have, whatever they needed. I will say that once a decision is made, there's not a way to appeal that decision. That's a reason that students need to make sure that they have everything that they need to up front. They've submitted everything that they can. It's also important to remember that if a student, especially in the situation of a student really didn't have an acceptable extenuating circumstance, a student could choose to continue going to school, and they could come back into compliance on their own. If it's, for example, if it's a GPA situation, yeah, they might lose aid for a semester or a year or whatever, but that doesn't mean that they lost aid forever. They might be able to come back into compliance in the future to be able to have that aid again. Obviously, that's not ideal. I know no student wants to forgo aid, but that is a possibility with situations. And again, if they have questions about this, they're free to contact us where we can talk about this at, a deeper level. Okay.
Do we know what percentage of appeals are normally approved?
Yeah, I saw Angela drop the reply, but essentially, I don't have the percentage, and it can vary because these reviews do go through 2 levels of review and a third if needed for a tiebreaker. So they are independent reviews. I will say though, I mean, we do work with students. I would say it's more likely than not, if a student can get the acceptable documentation, we will approve it. But as Kate said, it's not guaranteed. So I don't think we have the percentage, but I would say it's probably more on the side if they can follow our website and get those extenuating circumstances. I've seen more approved than denied. We do see some incompletes though, where students don't complete the process. So it's kind of like, it's not quite an even percentage because they just didn't complete the process, likely because they knew they didn't have extenuating circumstances.
Yes, absolutely. On the chat, it is a friendly process. We definitely try to work with the students however we can, because we want to see them complete their program. And so documentation is definitely critical for them to be able to get the approval process.
Yeah, and I would agree that we see, we see a lot approved. I mean, yes, there are going to be some denied, and I don't have any clue about a percentage either, but we do work hard to get as many approvals as we can within regulations.
Hey, there's one more question I saw it pop in, so I'll go ahead and answer Patty. Patty was asking if a student is denied but returns and pays for a semester, can they appeal again? And the answer is yes, Patty. Students can appeal once a decision is made, let's say they were denied for fall, they could reappeal in the spring, and them attending and possibly using other resources to pay could greatly strengthen their chances to be approved in a subsequent semester because they've demonstrated some academic success. Like Kate mentioned earlier, it improves their GPA. So maybe they had some issues. It just wasn't likely that a student was going to come into compliance. By them taking a semester out of pocket or using a private loan or some other resources, it would strengthen their appeal in the spring. And then one more thing, just to add on, Kate, it was kind of in my mind as you were talking. We certainly don't want to. We've seen students that's on their third, fourth, fifth SAP appeal, and we don't want to be a contribute to them being in loan indebtedness, having $60,000 of loans they borrowed and not even being close to graduating. So that is also part of the checks and balances of having these SAP appeal processes if it's just not likely a student is going to graduate. Because certainly that's a factor as well if these students won't be able to get to the finish line. Okay, we got one more question. Go ahead, Kate. Were you going to read it?
I sure was, sorry. I'm gonna let you take this one. But what happens when students who are returning after more than 10 years and can no longer show documentation because they might not have that? What are we looking for in those situations?
These are really great questions. So these are the ones, these are probably, I would say this is one of the most difficult types of situations that we have to work through, but we do work through these situations with the student. So I'll give an example that comes to mind, and it definitely is relatable to the situation. So likely that student, they probably had potentially, they could have had a career change. So they went to school maybe at 18 and 19, and they decided college was not good for them. Possibly reading into the situation a little bit, making some assumptions, but college just wasn't a good fit. So they entered into the workforce and got a job working. Now they're returning to school. They hope to get their bachelor's degree so that they can continue to grow professionally. So in those kinds of situations, we do have to get a bit creative and work directly with the student. Even explaining the situation with a very strong personal statement about how college was not a good fit for them when they were attending 10 years ago. And then maybe some documentation of how they entered into the workforce and their future plans. We do have to get a bit creative and work closely with those students, often one-on-one, but there's certainly things that we can do to help that student so that we're able to get approved. Also, we see it with maximum time frame where students might be returning to school, they're over the 180%, that they're close to graduating, they just never got a degree. But even changing their major, because when they went into school originally, they might have been in business, they entered the professional workforce and they want to get an engineering degree now. So even that change, because 10 years of their professional development, that can also be looked at as well in the totality of the circumstances. So we got to get a bit creative, but we do work very closely with those students. And that's definitely a student I would probably direct to the hub so we can counsel one-on-one because it is a bit unique. Fantastic question, though.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because like David said, that those are the situations that we do have to work most closely with the students, and just make sure that everybody's on the same track and, see what we can do for them. Okay, I feel like we've already covered this, but I'm gonna go ahead and make sure we're all on the same page here. If a student is maybe approved for an SAP plan, but they don't follow it, or they don't end up coming back into compliance, or they don't graduate when they're supposed to, or whatever, just because they are on an SAP appeal, like an approved appeal, if they would not follow that plan, they could lose eligibility again. Now that might be a situation where they have to appeal again if something else happened. It might be a situation where they lost it and they need to regain eligibility on their own. There's a lot of situations there. So like David said, future appeals can occur. Just because they've appealed once does not mean that they can't appeal again. But it is going to be dependent upon, what is the situation? Was there another extenuating circumstance? we have to look at the whole picture of what happened there with that student. So just kind of know that just because a student is on an approved plan or an approved appeal, sorry, that doesn't mean that they can do whatever they want. They do need to meet the terms of that appeal, of that academic success plan, and continue moving forward towards earning their degree. Okay. All right, we are going to move into scholarship appeals. Anything else on academic success plan for the moment? Okay. All right. So these are maybe adjacent to our SAP. They're certainly different, but a student who is in either situation of losing their scholarship or losing all financial aid are clearly, some students have to deal with both of these things at the same time. So let's talk about scholarships and scholarship renewal. So for scholarships, and this would be all of our institutional scholarships as well as our state scholarship promise. We're going to review for scholarship renewal after our spring semester. And students who do not meet that scholarship renewal requirement would have their scholarships canceled on their account. They're going to show as canceled. Now, of course, we've already talked about this a little bit. Students are notified starting early in the spring semester about that they're not meeting the requirements and what they could possibly do. So summer can be used to meet that renewal criteria, but students are going to be responsible for any summer class billing because scholarships do not pay in the summer. They also could use transient coursework. So if a student wants to take summer classes at home, as long as that all goes through the transient credit process and it's approved and everything, those credits would be eligible for scholarship renewal once we get the transcript from the other institution. And we also already talked about it, but if they're taking late summer courses or if they're taking transient courses and those are coming back after the fall bill due date, they may not have all of their aid on their account at the time of fall billing. So that is something that we always discuss with them, and certainly something that you could mention if you have a student who is likely going to be in that situation. I don't know that I have it on here. It's definitely on the website, but the majority of our scholarships are having the same renewal requirements. So students do have to earn 30 credit hours per year. That is fall, spring, and then of course summer if they need it. And maintain a 2.75 GPA. That's where our scholarships currently are for renewal, but those will always be posted on the scholarship website as well. There's a link on the right-hand menu that says renewal requirements. So that's where we send our students to double check, and they can see it lists all of the scholarships a student might possibly have and what the renewal requirements are for that specific award. So we do have deferrals and appeals for scholarships. So a deferral is for a student who might be taking time off for a specific reason. Generally, we see these for medical issues or military service. Some might be if they have I don't even know what they would be called, a practicum or an internship or something. Those might be a deferral kind of situation as well. And then we have appeals, and appeals are for students who have not met the renewal requirements for their scholarship. So deferrals and appeals are for very different situations. Students who want to defer have not necessarily lost their scholarship by any means. They just don't need to use it for a certain semester and they want to kind of put it on pause. Whereas an appeals student has or is in jeopardy of losing their scholarship, and they want to appeal to get it back to use it for the upcoming semester or year. So a reason a student might not or might lose their scholarship, it can be for the GPA or for the credit hour, because they have to meet both of those. And they have to be able to prove that some kind of extenuating circumstance kept them from meeting that renewal. So this is again a situation like the SAP appeals where we are going to ask them the reason that they didn't renew this scholarship. The process is also kind of similar to our SAP appeals, just that it's also on the student forum site. So the students are going to go to the wvu.studentforums.com site and be able to complete their scholarship appeal there. They are going to have to talk about, do a personal statement, tell why they did not meet the renewal requirements for their scholarship. And then also, they would need to upload documentation for whatever circumstance they cited. There are also priority and final deadlines for these appeals. And again, I'm going to send you to the website for those, as those are updated for each semester. And then once submitted, the scholarship team, their goal is to review and respond to these within 3 to 5 business days. So it is they try to get this a very fast turnaround for students so that students aren't waiting, not knowing what is happening with their scholarship. If a student goes to the website that we have linked here, how to request a scholarship appeal, how to upload documentation, we have written out quite clearly, the steps that they need to take to do that, and then what kind of documentation is acceptable and everything like that. Again, very similar to the documentation standards of the SAP appeal, and they'll all be outlined there. And I kind of feel like, everything that we talked about with the situations, the documentation, it's very similar here. Kind of the same thing applies. If it's a murky situation, have them contact us, have them talk to us. The documentation standards are very similar and everything. Let's see, I see the promise appeals are, for our purposes, work very similar to our institutional scholarship appeals. So they follow the same process, the same deadlines, and students do submit those promise appeals through the same channels. The only difference is there are some situations and some circumstances that if we cannot approve a student's promise appeal, that we will send it on to the state, but we will do that for a student. So to the student, it doesn't necessarily look different. Our scholarship team, if they are reviewing something that has to be sent to the state, we will do that for them. I don't know that happens all that often. And I don't even know what extra communication we would tell the student, we're unable to approve this appeal at this time. It's been sent to the state board to review. David, do you know timelines of that? I feel like I don't feel like we see a lot of those necessarily.
No, I mean, I do think the state tries to do a pretty good job, and we do communicate very specifically on the entire process so that the student's aware. I don't think we back into a specific time period, probably 1 to 2 weeks estimated, but we're kind of dependent upon a third party to get their part done. So our hands are kind of tied, but we do communicate specifically to the students so that they're aware it's been forwarded to the appropriate board.
Yeah, I know that we, try to align our processes with theirs as much as possible so that we can do as much as possible at the institutional level that we can. So we're not having a lot of students dependent upon sending things to the state level. All right, I did want to mention this. This is all just pulled from the state website, and it is quite new, but you've probably heard about it. And if you haven't gotten questions yet, you likely will soon. That the state has determined that students can appeal once a student loses their promise, like does not renew, they're able to appeal to get it back. That was not the case prior. Promise was not an appealable scholarship. So this is starting in this academic year, and students can utilize this process starting with this 24-25 year. So this is one time only situation where students can appeal to regain their promise eligibility. They can only do this appeal after they meet the renewal requirements. So that means that if a student does not renew promise at the end of, let's say, this spring semester, and they lose their promise, they then have, like, they cannot appeal until they have met those requirements. So it might take, say they don't have the GPA, okay? It might take a semester or two for them to get up to those requirements and then appeal. If their appeal is approved, any time frame that it took for them to meet the renewal requirements are considered semesters of that scholarship utilization. That is going to be probably a lot more information as we see exactly how this plays out and how those appeals are, how those are coming in and being approved and whatnot. We'll have to be in communication more with that. But that means that basically a student can get them back, but might get it back for less time, moving forward, if it takes another semester for them to get up to that required, the required renewal requirements. And that's going to go through our scholarship appeal process. So a student does not have to submit directly to the state. That's going to come through our scholarship team. And then again, if they have to forward anything through that they can, but right now, and again, this is new, this can change. Right now, they would do it through our scholarship appeal process if they're looking for a second chance promise. I linked here, this is the state promise website. Basically, this is the information that is on their website right now. There's not a lot. Like I said, it's new. They're working through a lot of things. So I anticipate that as we get more information from the state, we will, of course, keep you all updated, but we'll be able to better explain exactly how this is going to work. But it's something that's kind of still new, still in process. All right, I saw the chat light up.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
I'm going to start with this one. So they're not granted scholarship utilization until they come into compliance on their own, but are charged semesters of utilization for coming into compliance on their own.
That is how I understand what they've put out, yes.
And also this one-time promise means students can only appeal and regain it once, and if they lose it again, it's gone, right?
Yes.
Okay, the other question is about the guarantee program and how that differs from promise.
Okay, so the guarantee program is dependent upon different factors than promise. Actually, you know what, David, do you want to talk about this one?
Sure. So
Because I don't want to.
I'll try to be general because there's different layers. I think just to answer the basics of your question, promise is awarded. The guarantee program is a last dollar in program. So a student may be receiving promise and could also have a portion of the guarantee applied up to cover the tuition and fees. So eligibility requirements is different because the guarantee, and this is where we're getting into the weeds a little bit, the guarantee program looks at the 65,000 AGI or less for the first year. But in terms of like recipients, it's possible a student could have promise and then also have a portion of the guarantee to cover the remaining part of that bill. But just eligibility, promise is merit-based, so it's not looking at necessarily the SAI or AGI. It's not. Guarantee is looking at a specific adjusted gross income on the FAFSA.
And David, to that, if the student loses promise, then the guarantee won't backfill what promise was awarding, correct? It's going to stay at what they were receiving from guarantee and promise, right?
So there are certain eligibility factors for renewal, like SAP, but there could be situations where a student loses promise due to, let's say, just GPA issues, but they're still meeting SAP. Then the guarantee would cover the remaining balance.
It would. Okay.
As long as they met the renewal requirements for the guarantee. I mean, there are some factors, it's probably few and far between, but there are some factors where a student could lose promise. And if there was a remaining balance not covered with that lost dollar in program, that the guarantee would kick in.
Could one of that requirements be the number of hours
For
for promise? I don't take the 30 hours.
yes.
So if I took 29 and I had a 4.0 GPA and I lose promise, guarantee then backfills what I just lost?
In theory, yes. Although we would hopefully work with that student so that they would get their 30 hours, but that is correct.
Okay, because you can see there might be a couple of loopholes where, and I know that's not obviously the intent of this, but where students might wiggle their way out of, or not worry or stress as much about promise if they can get away with using guarantee instead.
Yeah, and there are once again there are certain, not every promise student is going to be eligible for guarantee. In fact, it may not be a very high number, but there are different things there that potentially, you know, that could change in their financial aid factor. I mean, very good observation.
And there's a couple more questions about second chance promise. One is, what is the timeline for measuring credit hours earned? 15 credit hours in the most recent term, 30 credit hours in the past calendar year, or some other metric?
I believe that's what it would be, David, if you interpret that differently, but those are the renewal requirement, you know, credit hour renewal requirement. So I believe that's how we would look at it.
Good question, Joe. I don't know if you want to come on mute. I just want to make sure I understand your question. But yes, it's 15 hours per term, 30 hours for the full year. And second chance promise is only effective for students who receive promise in starting in 23-24. So it's not like it's going back to infinity. It's only for students who receive promise in 23-24 or on, which is why it really only impacts a very limited number of students. And what we've seen is actually some of these students, instead of being approved for second chance, the state has actually worked with approving them on an appeal instead. So they're not utilizing that one and only second chance promise appeal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, David. So the question is more pertaining to the GPA is an easy metric for us to identify. It's like if I fall out of compliance and then I complete a term with 15 credit hours, do I get second chance, or do I need to go another term and complete another 15 hours for a total of 30? That's what I'm trying to figure out. At what point have I earned enough hours to get second chance?
We'll send out some more detailed information, Joe. I don't want to answer, but it would be, in my understanding, it would be the 30 hours. So you would need, but they could be eligible to appeal after the 15. But the utilization, so it's kind of both. It could be the 15, but these second chance appeals, we've still been kind of working with the state to iron some of this out. But technically with second chance, it could be the 15. So they completed the 15, they could then start their appeal then.
So then it doesn't matter whether they're off cycle or on cycle.
For second chance, from my understanding, that is correct. I would like to get, I don't work with promises closely as some of my counterparts in student aid operations. So I would like to get some clarification, and maybe we can release that, Kate, through the listserv or an email, because I don't want to speak out of turn and give out any kind of misinformation, because second chance is so new.
Yes, it's very new, and our like full staff has not even been trained on this from the state yet. Like that's how new it is. So we wanted to share it because it's out on the state website and we anticipate that you'll get questions about it. But this is something that we're still building our knowledge on, and that we'll need to come back and clarify a lot for you. We anticipate that that's, you know, going to happen later, hopefully later in the spring semester.
But I will say, just to kind of wrap that up, because yes, in a sense, it would be off cycle, but Joe, they would, because Promise would actually utilize the semester they didn't actually receive it as part of their utilization rate, that would be factored in. So let's say they did meet the 15, didn't receive it in the fall, completed the 15. The semester they didn't receive it with second chance would be considered part of the utilization of their 8 years of eligibility of Promise, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Okay, there's one other little question about second chance. What if the promise was lost based on hours, not GPA? Could that student use the second chance?
Yep, again, kind of how we've been talking. Yes, they could. They would have to, get to a point where they have met that hour renewal criteria though. Yep. All right. As soon as we learn more about this and get more clarification from the state, I think what we could do is maybe do like a one pager of fast facts for you all, and send that out. And then if this is a situation where you're getting a lot of questions or it's not clear, we can always meet again, to, discuss it further. So I'm sorry that we don't have everything yet, but also know that this is brand new to us too. So, sometimes that's just how it works, unfortunately. Okay, we're done with my part, with our information. Do we have any more questions for me and my team before we move to Misty and DegreeWorks? Okay.
I have a feeling that we may end up with questions based on what we hear about DegreeWorks.
Yeah, absolutely.
If your team would be kind enough to stick around and just sort of see what transpires, I think we would be grateful.
Yeah, certainly.
I do have a question. In a situation, this is Carolyn Kitchens, and my camera's not working for some reason, sorry. I have a student actually bring the situation to me of where, their FAFSA is based off of their parents, but they're paying for their own college tuition. So what can we do in those types of situations? Like, can the student declare independence from the parents, and then the FAFSA be based off them? With this specific student, he said he didn't want to do that because then the parents couldn't declare him on their taxes, and so it's kind of a weird situation. But what's the typical advice that you give in those types of situations?
Sure. So dependence or independence on the FAFSA is not the same as what a lot of us might, like if a student is independently living and paying for themselves and everything, we would say, oh yeah, that's an independent student. FAFSA does not agree. There are very specific criteria questions on the FAFSA. And if the student can't honestly answer yes to any of those situations, and those are like, do you have a dependent, have you been active duty military, are you older than a certain age, there's specific like that. If a student answers no to those, they are considered dependent. The other path, I guess, of independence is if a student might not be able to answer yes to any of those questions, but maybe they left home because of an abusive situation or an abandonment kind of situation. That would be something that we could talk to the student about and possibly change their status. But if it's just a student who is self-sufficient, if there's no other circumstances, no bad things have happened in that family, that student is still considered a dependent student. And we have a lot of those. That is not a unique situation. We have a lot who, ask us about that. But that is federal regulation of what is a dependent versus an independent student. So, we could certainly talk to them about the questions and those other situations if they think they should fall into one of those. But a lot of times, we have to tell the students you're actually a dependent, even though you're paying for your own, and like, that's awesome. We love to see that. But you're a dependent student.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, let's switch over to the discussion of responsive versus classic dashboard with DegreeWorks. Some of you probably saw the emails that have been circulating about how classic dashboard is going away. And so this is a great opportunity for us to hear from our registrar friends about the changes, the timeline, and that sort of thing. So Misty, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joy, and thank you again for having us here today. And that was a great introduction. So I'm going to keep mine brief. I'm Misty Woodham-McKyle from the Registrar's Office, and I'm here with our whole DegreeWorks team, including Joelle Starn, who is our Assistant Registrar for Academic Progress, and Amon McWilliams, Kent Campbell, and Sarah Lowry. So as Joyce said, you all may be experiencing some deja vu. We were here a couple years ago talking about the launch of Responsive Dashboard. It was a soft launch, and we've had both versions of Responsive and Classic, living alongside with one another, but we are at that point to where Ellucian is no longer supporting the Classic Dashboard. So this presentation today is just going to basically highlight the main differences between those dashboards, and then just really provide you with some resources to help you along the way, but most importantly, reinforce that we're here to help you through the transition. So since we're very short on time, I'm just going to let Joelle get started. I'll be watching the chat, and we will answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Misty. So very nice to see everyone here. I see a lot of familiar names. If you don't know me, like Misty had said, my name is Joelle Starn, and I just want to do a quick high-level overview of the differences between classic versus responsive, the older versus newer versions of those interfaces. Overall, I think we're going to try to do this for about 20 minutes. And then leave some questions, some time for questions at the end. So I'm just reviewing some highlights of this document, but should you want to view the document in full, or if you want to share it with any of your colleagues, I will show you later in the presentation where you can find where this lives on our website. So I'll point that to you later in the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. So some of these slides, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and skip. So again, what brought us here today, beginning mid-July 2025, the classic version of DegreeWorks will no longer be available. So specifically, if you're taking down notes, this will happen between the dates of July 12th and 14th. So you don't have to look at a calendar. That is Saturday, Sunday, Monday of that week. So with the next upgrade, not only is it no longer supported by Ellucian, but the underlying structure that makes up Classic will no longer exist. So we have to upgrade, and that will definitely be going away. It's been a long time coming. The responsive dashboard has been living side by side since about fall 2020 in the portal. And we had announced back in February of 2022 that we thought it would remain at least through spring 2023. But thankfully, we were able to have it exist about a year longer than that. So now that we're transitioning to it, we have created a, so this slide 5, so when you do revisit this document on our website, this slide 5 is a really good landing page for any advisor. This page will show you an overview of these comparisons we give in this PowerPoint document between the dashboards. So you can navigate here, and you can control click on a particular link, and it will have you navigate directly to a particular topic. So some of these items will show you like a side-by-side comparison between the responsive and classic, and then some of them will just show you the responsive dashboard, but each of them will explain the differences you can expect to see. A point I do want to mention before we dive in is that
If you're not familiar with the responsive dashboard at this time, just know that the data that gets pulled into the responsive dashboard is the same data that gets pulled into the classic dashboard. So meaning if you make an academic status update to a student's record, if you add a minor to a student, as soon as it shows in classic, it'll show in responsive. So whether you refresh process new or you wait for the overnight server to refresh that information, as soon as it appears in classic, it'll appear in responsive. So the same data is coming in. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these other slides. So here you can see this is the landing homepage, and you can see that it contains a simple student search as well as the pop-up menu for the advanced search. So before the advanced search lived over here in the find button. Down here it lives in the link under advanced search. These items appear at the top of the responsive dashboard. They appear persistent across all pages. So meaning if you click on the exceptions tab, or if you click on this plans tab, these items will remain for you to click into and out of. One thing I do want to mention, a couple things I want to mention, is that if you go into the advanced search and you do select multiple IDs, and you select multiple students that you want to view, instead of being able to toggle next and previous, a drop-down box will actually appear right here beside student ID, and you'll be able to select those IDs that you had selected in the advanced search. So it appears as a drop-down box, and you'll have to select the student that you are wanting to view at a given time. Another thing I do want to mention about this landing page is that if you have a student who has multiple degree types, so if they're a dual degree, or if you can see their BS and PhD simultaneously, if you go into the exceptions tab, or if you go into the plans tab, just think of the worksheet tab here as your landing page. So after you're done performing an exception or you're done with plans, go ahead and navigate back to the worksheet tab, because you'll see when you go into the exceptions or plans tab, you can still toggle the degree. Even though you can toggle, it doesn't actually work to toggle in those pages. So that's why I'm saying the worksheet tab is your home tab, your landing tab. So after you're done performing actions in these, go ahead and navigate back to the worksheet tab. Okay, so just a couple quick tips there for you. Okay, I am going to skip this next page because it just reviews more about that landing home page. Just a couple of other quick differences here. So this is just, again, getting into the advanced search, and you will find this for much of the responsive versus classic dashboard, that many of the items still exist. They just exist in a different format. It contains the same information, but it appears a little bit differently. So you can see this between the two here. And moving forward. Okay, so regarding what we call the student header information, the summary data that appears at the top. So some of the main differences, the main takeaways for the header, where and how the information appears does look a little bit different. Another thing to note about the header of the responsive dashboard is that it's what we call dynamic. So that means that the header information may only appear if it is listed on a student's record. So an example would be over here, like, let's see, an example. Well, if the student had a minor or did not have a minor, sorry, my apologies. If the student did not have a minor, you would still see that field listed here, but it would appear blank. Over here, the field just won't appear at all. So that means it's dynamic. Or here with transfer credits, you can see transfer credits here is 0. Down here, transfer credits just does not appear as a field. Or if a student has a hold over here, or does not have a hold, sorry, I keep getting that mixed up. If the student does not have a hold over here, then it will not appear over here. So that's what I mean by it being dynamic. It only appears if the student has that relevant information. Another thing is that hyperlinks are no longer available in the header. So up here in the Classic, you can kind of see where, for example, catalog year is highlighted. And the Classic dashboard, if you clicked on that, just got over the flu, so apologies if my throat goes out. But over here in the Classic, if you clicked on that, it would take you directly to that archived catalog year. And you can see the students given catalog year. And the responsive, we cannot hyperlink any of these items. So instead, what we're able to do is over here at the top, you can see here external links, and we've got external links listed up here. So there's a link to the catalog here. There also is a link to SAP information, and there's also a link regarding graduation application, applying for graduation. And so external links now lives up here, any of those external links. Okay, so let's see. Let me go ahead and move on. Okay, so diving into more of what I had just spoken about, the responsive dashboard being dynamic. Most items will appear, most students will have the following items appear in their audit. So we've got level, we've got classification, major, program, college, even WVU earned credits, overall earned, attempted GPA, SAP completion rate. These items will appear for most students. Items that may be dynamic, that will only appear if it's listed on a student's record. That could be academic standing, that could be holds, transfer credits, area of emphasis, minors, whether or not a student had applied for graduation, that will appear up here too. And two, when we do time ticketing, when we do that, when registration opens up, that's also dynamic. That'll appear only when time ticketing happens. Okay. And actually, I'm just going to throw this tip out there too. Some of these are actually hard-coded in from Ellucian out of the box, like no matter what level, classification, major, program, college, these would have appeared no matter what. These other items are custom items that we coded in. So while I say if the data does not exist, it won't appear, for some of these other items like classification, you might instead see something like goal come up. That just means there's nothing there. So if there's something weird that comes up like that, that just means that the data wasn't found. So if that comes up, but generally it just won't appear. It's just a quick tip. Okay, so this is just an example of what I had described about how under external links, how you can view these other locations for information. So catalog, SAP, graduation application. And again, we just want to highlight that since if you click on the catalog here, it will take you to the main landing page, the most current catalog. If you're looking for a student with a 22-23 catalog, be sure to navigate to archived catalogs. So this is just catalog.wvu.edu. Just look at the top tabs for that and go to archived if you need to see one of those older ones. And this is just another example of the comparisons between classic and responsive. This in particular, so I'm not going to go through this at length, but this is, just demonstrating those examples. So in here, we've got the refresh dates listed up here. So the date that DegreeWorks pulled in data from Banner, the date the audit itself was last refreshed. You can see those items in blue and the responsive dashboard having been separated out up here for Banner data, and this down here for DegreeWorks data when it was last refreshed. The different views you have in the worksheet, it just appears down here in the secondary block. And then also this has been moved, the Save as PDF has been moved to this printer icon up here. So if you need to print off your the audit, this is where you would go. Okay. So and this is, I mean, I think most of adjusting to the responsive dashboard is really just getting in there and looking around and using it, because most of the data is there, but it's just giving your eyes time to adjust to it, because it does have a different feel. It really does. Okay, print function. Yeah, that's what we had just talked about. That's the print icon you'll go to. You'll just click on that and open PDF. Okay, this one, surprisingly, this is the one I get the most questions about. So where can you tell the advisors the student has? Where's that contact information? That's actually moved to this contact icon up here. It appears as an envelope, and you can just click on this, or a student can click on that, and you will see both the student's information listed. You can click on the student to get their email, and then you'll also see any advisors listed there too, and you'll click on there, or the student can click on there to get the advisor's email. So again, that's been moved up to that contact card. Okay, GPA, calculator, class history, petitions, notes. So this item up here, so the 3 vertical dots will bring up all of these tools in DegreeWorks: GPA calculator, class history, petitions. You might not have access to petitions. I think WU Potomac uses that. And then notes. So let's go ahead and look at notes, I believe is on the next page. So the notes here, you can click to add the note in that menu, and it doesn't open up as a new window. It opens up as a pop-up window. And just so you know, there is one new feature. Once you go to add a new note, there will be a checkbox, and it will allow you to check not available to student. This actually makes the note private, so that any user who has those student keys, any person who's labeled as a student won't be able to see that note. But having said that, it's not exactly private. Anybody who has like advisor access, or who has access in the registrar's office, will be able to see those notes. So it's not entirely private. It's just private to anyone who has the student keys or the student access. So I don't know for what reason you might want to use that, but it's available to you. So same features exist, but the left side menu has been moved. Yeah. Has been moved to that kebab menu. I'm just rereading it, seeing if there's anything else I can add here about that.
Hey, Joelle, I'm answering
Yes.
the notes or the questions in the chat as we go along. But since you are on this notes page specifically, there's a question about the notes section no longer allowing users to view worksheets and create a note simultaneously. And I know we had talked about addressing that, and would the notes still be viewable at the bottom?
Yeah, I believe they're available at the bottom. Let me check. I mean, let me see here. It'll load. My windows are a little bit, okay. Yeah, the notes are available at the bottom. I should know that off the top of my head. But yes, the notes
It's
are
not
available.
addressing the question you're asking in the chat, though. I want to make sure, because it's saying view the worksheets and then create a note.
So
Perfect.
with how I had looked this up recently in the Lucian forums, because since it doesn't populate in a window unto itself, since it pops up in that manner, if you do need to see a side-by-side comparison of anything in responsive, you might just need to open up 2 instances of the responsive dashboard. Because I think like when you're viewing the notes tab, for example, you can just open up another instance of responsive to view it. But yeah, like I just indicated too, the notes do also live at the bottom. So there's different ways to view those notes. Does that answer the question? Oh, okay. Would students have to scroll to the bottom and click on the notes via the ellipses? Yeah, so the students should be able to view it at the bottom.
Hi, Joel. I asked this question about the notes specifically. I know for us, oftentimes we try to make sure that we can multitask, especially if students have specific questions about notes and need, an advisor to review something or, reiterate something in regards to classes or exceptions. So that's more or less kind of why I asked that question. And whether or not this will be something that could be updated later in terms of functionality to not necessarily accommodate to advisors and students, but make it a little bit more seamless. And if we do need to refer to a previous note, but also type a note at the same time, whether or not that's an option that could be coming down later with, updates, rollouts.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, when it comes to the responsive dashboard, anytime we update what might have not been possible before could become possible in the future. But as I understand it, because I know there was some questions in the Ellucian forums, Ellucian is the one who supports DegreeWorks, but there were other people questioning if there was, a better way to view the notes. But unfortunately, this is just how it is at this time. And like I said, if you do want to try to, make a note while viewing the older notes, you can try to like open up 2 instances if that helps. But again, I mean, that could change in the future. There might be additional functionality that gets added later with future updates. All right. Any other questions about that or anything you want to add, Misty?
No, and just so you know, we are taking notes. Our team's taking notes for anything in the future. We can always put things out to the Ellucian, I don't want to say their wish list or whatever for upgrades, but as we go through, we can kind of give them what we would like to see with possible upgrades and things of that nature. I know someone asked about accessibility purposes and changing the background color. Those feature that ability to change colors. I know that's been one of the big things in the past, from the classic to the responsive, and changing colors has been, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, has been taken away from us, and they have indicated that the responsive, one of the big pushes for the responsives, in addition to being like mobile friendly for students and things like that, is it adheres to accessibility standards. So that being said, we can certainly, again, any feedback you all have, we are happy to reach out. So any feedback you have, we will reach out, we will ask questions, and we are certainly happy to get back to you with at least their response, and happy to reach out on with any requests that you all would like to put forth, and we will put those forth on your behalf. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, and even in the past, probably just last semester too, before we didn't have the SAP appearing in responsive dashboard, we didn't have the graduation application, the status of that appearing in the responsive dashboard. And I've been able to do those things. So yeah, you feel free to reach out. And like Misty said, if we can get it in there, we'll get it in there. And if not, we can reach out to Lucian. And like I said, if it's not available now, it's not to say it might not be available in the future, that functionality. So, okay, so if we're good, I'll go ahead and continue this presentation. I did see that there was a question about the subject history. I did glance that, and we'll cover that, I think, on the next slide, actually. So before, in the classic dashboard, we did have that subject history, and that was something we were able to customize and to create for everybody. That functionality is no longer possible in the responsive dashboard. So a lot of the customizations we were able to do in the past, we just can't do with responsive. And I think it just has something to do, again, maybe with accessibility, but it's Ellucian maybe streamlining their products. There was a lot of variability between what one institution's DegreeWorks would look like versus another. So I think that's also something they're trying to do, is to streamline the appearance of that kind of thing. But in having gone to the responsive, again, some of these features we had in the past, specifically in regard to the subject history, is not possible now. But there is here in responsive dashboard, there's a link that you should now have access to. It's called student data. And in student data, if you click on that, you can view the list of subjects and courses alphabetically here, and then also numerically by course number. So this is one substitution that we have in that place. And this lives in the class details section of that tab. And then other information and student data can also be discerned, such as curricula codes, test information, course attributes. It's really, honestly, this view, the student data, this was available in Classic, but it was more of a diagnostic feature available only to like the DegreeWorks scribers, the DegreeWorks coders. And so moving forward, we were able to give those keys that we had previously to advisors. So now you guys can kind of see what we in DegreeWorks could see behind the scenes. And in this view, there lives so much data. So try not to get overwhelmed. I mean, I don't think you will, but I'm just going to tell you there's a lot of data in there. But the one section you do want to go to is the class detail. Let me go ahead and pull over this one student I have, just so you can see. Okay, and I think, can you guys see my screen when I do that? Okay. Because it's no longer highlighting red, so I just wanted to be sure. Okay. So let me go to that class or that student data section. So this is what I'm talking about here. Can you all see that, the class detail block?
Yes.
Okay. So here is all the courses. This is by subject and then by course number. So that's exactly what lived in that subject history. And then here, there also lives a lot of other data that could be relevant to you as well. If you scroll down here, there's more data that exists. If you scroll to the right, you can see the CRN listed all the way at the end. And you can see other information in here too. Like if they are undergrad, grad, PR, you'll see the school listed here. School in DegreeWorks is undergrad, grad, PR. So if you have like a graduate student and you're not sure, well, why are these credits not populating at the grad level? Well, maybe it's maybe they have a PR record, maybe those credits are listed at the PR level. You can see all of that here, undergrad, grad, and PR. So that's kind of helpful. And like I said, there's other data in here. You can see if you dive in that deep and you look at major codes, you can see the major code listed, the program code listed, the catalog year associated. If you scroll down towards the bottom, you can see test codes in here, even whatever test codes are being pulled in behind the scenes. Custom detail, report detail, I would recommend just ignoring that. It's some of our custom coding that we use behind the scenes. But anyway, so that is just an introduction to that student data information. But anyway, I wanted to just, because I know we're getting close on time, but this is just a really good overview of some of those difference between the classic and responsive. We go into the what if, exceptions, plans. So I want for you all to know where this lives, because that's one of my biggest takeaways, is for you to know what resources are available to you and where to find this document. So this is going to be registrar.wvu.edu is where you can find it, and click on the resources and training tab. select banner DegreeWorks training and documentation. Let me just show that to you. So if you type in registrar.wvu.edu, this is the tab you'll select on. Tab you'll select. Banner and DegreeWorks training and documentation. And this is the information that we have. DegreeWorks upgrade set for summer 2025. So this information lives here. This is when we're going to update it. Our plans for the future. We're going to have, this is today, but we're going to have another training so that you're aware. We're going to get into more of those differences in a fuller presentation and maybe even do some demos. And that is going to be on March 19th from 10 to 11:30. If you have anyone who is not familiar with the responsive dashboard and who might be interested in viewing that training, you can have them navigate to our website here, and then they can register for that training here. So again, that's going to be on March 19th at 10 o'clock. And this PowerPoint presentation that I have been reviewing with you, if you want to view it more fully, you can click on this link and it will take you to this presentation. Okay. The link in DegreeWorks takes you to the star screen. I'm reading the notes. Let me see.
So since we are sort of at the end of our time, I would love for us to try to address that question that Misty had mentioned, because it does cross over with financial aid.
Which one? Are we talking about the repeated courses that just popped up, or?
Freddie,
Oh, the print,
courses is
the
also,
printed.
but
Yes.
Freddie mentioned.
So Joelle, and I think we had talked about this one too, and I'm going to answer the repeated question one, but and I'm trying to find it now. I'm scrolling. Or Freddie, it's printing. They're having when we print the PDF and the notes don't populate on the PDF. Joelle, we talked about that I think before, the printing errors that we're having.
So I know that. So if you create a PDF and print from the responsive dashboard, I believe those notes do appear, but the only caveat to that is previously, I believe in Classic, if you navigate, this is all about plans, I think, right? So if you go to plans and you try to print the plan from responsive, it will print, but some of those notes, because notes can live at different levels in the plans. So you can have a note at the overall level, you can have a note on the class, you can have a note for that semester. Some of those notes do not print. So I know that was one caveat. I think pharmacy had brought that up to us at one point, and that's just not a possibility right now. It's not a functionality that exists. But again, on the overall audit, if you print a PDF, it works fine. But when you, again, go into the SEP, that's DegreeWorks language. If you go into the plans, then yeah, some of those notes might not print.
And Freddie, I'm not sure that answers your question, because you were talking about the PDF specifically, right?
Because you can print a PDF from the plans, and then you can print a PDF from the worksheet audit itself, like the main view. And I think the main view works fine. It's just when you go into plans and try to print a PDF from that area, some of those additional notes might not print. From what I'm aware, if you all are seeing something different though, let me know.
So Joy, what we can do too, I know we're short on time, so what we can do too, we'll address this specifically with Freddie, see what he's doing, making sure like it's working. If it's not, we will address that and make sure we can put that, I was going to say, we can add any of these questions that we feel need addressed. We can also update the PowerPoint to make sure anything specifically is addressed. We'll put an update on the PowerPoint. Because this is good information. So we want to make sure that all of these things can be addressed in the PowerPoint specifically, and we can update those. And so we'll put an update date on the PowerPoint from when that PowerPoint's updated, so everyone will know. So again, your feedback is appreciated. If there's anything that this group specifically sees that they would like addressed in that, it's a working document. We're happy to address that so we can make it better for anyone else that looks at it in the future. So please let us know, and we absolutely can do that. And I'm so sorry that we're short on time.
Questions are great, right? So
Yeah.
Kate, if you're willing to share the PowerPoint recording, what we will also do is we will host this on our advising website so that people have access to it. When it's available, we'll put a note in our message of the week, which will also give Misty and Joelle time to update their own PowerPoint as a resource. And we will point out in our little accompanying blog article other places people can go to get those resources, like the training in March for responsive or some of the updated financial information. So we really, really appreciate you, both of these units, coming to share this information with us and help us figure out how to stay on top of the systems that we need to use with our students. And also very much appreciate everyone's careful attention today and all of the really great questions that you ask. This is traditionally how we make our systems better, by collecting feedback and, going back and forth with each other about how to improve. So want to thank our presenters and also thank all of our advisors and support units for being here today. Thank you guys so much. Stay warm.